Today we're going to talk about fault finding on your electric fence so that you know how to troubleshoot it, look for problems, and solve them. Everyone who is operating an electric fence should have some basic testing equipment. If you don't have anything to test your electric fence, it's like driving a car without a speedometer. You need to understand how your fence is performing so that you know when there's a problem and you know how to find it. If you are testing your electric fence currently by touching it, then your electric fence is definitely not working. You should be afraid of your electric fence just like the livestock are. And also, it's worth noting that your regular multimeter or voltmeter, analog or digital like you would have for household electricity or DC electricity, is not going to work with the high voltages of an electric fence. It could damage your equipment. You need to use electric fence specific testing equipment. At the most basic I've ever seen is this basic test light. And this has, most of the testers will have a spike to go in the ground or put on your ground wire and then a contact point for the hot wire. So with this very basic unit that has no brand on it or anything, if you touch to the ground and the hot wire, the light will just blink. So that gives you very little information. All that we know is that there's some voltage on the fence. We don't know exact what number it is, just that the fence has some voltage. A good tool that's similar to this is this live fence monitor that Gallagher produces. Same idea. You can stick the spike in the ground, clip this right on your fence, and this will blink each time the fence pulses, as long as the voltage of the fence is above around 2,000 volts. So this is kind of like a check engine light on your car. If you're looking at this every night, it should tell you, your fence is on, but if this is no longer blinking, then you know that you've got a problem and you've got to go out and check your fence. Having something like this, or regularly checking your fence voltage with one of these other tools I'm going to show you, is a way better method to know how your fence is functioning than the most common way of knowing that your fence is not working, which is that your livestock are out. All of a sudden there's pigs out on the road or your sheep are out of their pasture. There's easier ways to find out if your fence is malfunctioning. The most basic, common type of tester has multiple lights, and each light will light up at a different voltage. So this one says if your fence is putting out 2,000 volts, this one's going to light up. All the way up to 10,000 volts, this one's going to light up. This type of tester is just going to tell you the relative performance of your fence by indicating roughly in 2,000 volt increments what the voltage on your fence is. It's pretty coarse, but I can see here, that the bottom two lights are flashing. So we're at least above 4,000 volts. A slightly more expensive but more accurate option is going to be a digital readout fence voltmeter like this one here. So when we do the same test with this voltmeter, we're actually going to be able to see a number. And in this case, the fence is reading 6.3 kilovolts or 6,300 volts. So this is a lot more accurate, and these digital voltmeters can also be used for additional troubleshooting like testing your fence grounds. The next step up from the fence testing voltmeters is a fault finder like this one from Gallagher. And the difference is that a fault finder is also going to tell you information about your current flow. It's going to tell you how many amps of draw are on the fence and which direction that current is flowing, which is critical for troubleshooting. This model also has a removable ground probe, which you can use for more detailed troubleshooting to test between a ground wire or the soil, or you can simply use it handheld just like this, and it'll ground through your body to get an accurate reading. Another version of a fault finder is this fence remote, and this is a Gallagher remote for the I series of energizers, which ranges from 18 joules all the way up to 100 joules, so the more powerful energizer. And not only can this check your fence voltage and amperage and tell you which direction the current is flowing, but you can also turn your fence off and on from anywhere in the system, which is an incredibly useful feature if you're looking for a larger energizer. These remotes can also display information about a fence monitoring system that you can install on the I-Series, which checks the voltage and the current flow at different points in your fence and saves you hours of troubleshooting if you have a larger acreage, so that you, instead of starting off right at the Energizer and working your way out, you'll know already that the problem is out there in field 3. The starting point for troubleshooting your fence is understanding your fence's baseline performance. Every fence is going to be different. Every combination of wire, netting, temporary fences, and your Energizer and your grounding system, as well as the conditions on your farm, are all going to influence your fence's performance. So it's important to know when there's no problem, no big fault on the fence, what's the baseline. So how we're going to check that is using your voltmeter, or ideally your fault finder. We're going to touch the ground probe here to the ground wire on the fence, or put it directly into the earth to get your measurement. And then we're going to touch the steel portion right here to the hot wire of the fence. And while we're holding it like that, we're going to get our reading. In this case, the fence voltage on this system that's performing well and has no major faults is 6.8 kilovolts. That's 6,800 volts. So that's going to be our baseline. When we start to see the voltage decline significantly from our baseline, that's when we know we have a problem we want to check. And you should definitely aim to maintain 5,000 volts or more on your fence at all times to provide a good shock through a range of species. The open output voltage of an Energizer is going to be somewhere around 8,000 to 10,000 volts. So if everything's performing properly, you're going to see those high voltages. If you start to drop below 5,000, get down to 4,000, 3,000 volts on your fence, your Energizer won't be able to actually deliver the full amperage to provide an adequate shock to your livestock or to predators that you're trying to keep out. If your baseline fence voltage is below that 5,000 mark, then you need to investigate other problems with your fence, such as your Energizer size or the adequacy of your grounding rod field, and we'll talk about that in another video. All right, now we've created a short further down in the fence, so let's see what's changed in terms of our fence's performance. Now, when I check the fence, I can see a voltage of somewhere between 3 and 4 kilovolts, and I'm checking the different wires. I'm also seeing that there's a 4 amp draw, 4 to 5 amp draw, and there's an arrow pointing me that way. So I know that from my Energizer, which is hooked up here, the current is flowing down that way, and so I'm going to travel in that direction to work on finding my fault. We're going to continue down our fence line in the direction that the current is flowing, and we can see here we're down to around 2.8 kilovolts, and we've still got about 5 amps flowing this way. We definitely want to check the fence at each intersection. So if you have another fence taking off this direction that's taking its power from this fence, you're going to want to go to that spot and check the hot wires on both sides of the junction, right? Because that's going to tell you if the short is on that fence line or this fence line continuing down. If you are on the fence where the short still is, you're going to still see that amperage draw and your low voltage. But if you jump over to another fence line where it doesn't have the short or the fault on it, then you're not going to see the amperage draw on that fence line. So here we have our short that we've created. In this case, we've just driven a short ground rod into the soil and touched it against our hot wire. But we'll have another video that shows you some of the most common faults on permanent and on temporary electric fences. So when we're on this side of our short, the Energizer's over there, and we can still see the current flowing here. We can still see our 4 amp draw with the arrow pointing this way. But as soon as we've passed the fault that we're searching for, we're still seeing a low voltage, but our current, our amperage has dropped to almost nothing. Now there's only a 0.3 amp draw. So, and the arrow has also disappeared. So when you get to the point where the amperage drops substantially, you know that you've passed your fault, and you should go back toward the previous point you tested and search for what the problem is. At first glance, It may seem like the price of these fence testing units is expensive, but it will save you tons of time and tons of headaches in both the short term and the long term. Being able to monitor the performance of your fence, identify when you have a problem with a voltmeter, and to quickly locate a fault and fix it with a fault finder, it's going to save you from livestock getting out of your fences and ensure that your energizer is adequately sized and your ground system is performing effectively. So it's definitely a worthwhile investment for anybody who's operating an electric fence.